I think as a developer, you always try to build something beautiful. You want to make that perfect, but it rarely starts out that way. Scaling in our case is very, very important because you're adding our piece of code onto your API, and we first have to handle all the load that you have. And secondly, we cannot slow down your API. Those were the two guiding principles that we had when we started designing this product. We cannot slow your API, and we have to be able to have the same amount of load that you have, and we have to do it at cost. My name is Vedran. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Treble.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries who share in the critical moments of what it takes to change an industry and build and lead a team that has your back. I'm your host, Noah Labhart, and today how Vedran Cindric built the tool to make it easy to understand what's going on with your APIs. All this and more on Code Story. Vedran Cindric grew up in a small town in rural Croatia. As far back as he can remember, he's been tinkering with computers, messing around with DOS, and of course, gaming. From the very early days, computers became his passion. When he finished college, he started his own successful design agency before building his current venture. He likes to watch movies and TV shows and loves to barbecue. I learned that in Croatia, they don't smoke meat as much as we do in the States and stick mainly to pork over beef. One thing I loved that Vedran said was the best way to eat a salad is when you're having barbecue. Otherwise, you wouldn't eat a salad. When business was booming, Vedran and his team built a tool to help them track all of the APIs they were supporting. After putting it down several times and picking it back up, they finally figured out how to scale it properly and decided to finish building it and share it with the world. This is the creation story of Treble.
So we like to say that Treble makes it super easy to understand what's going on with your APIs. And that's like a really nice marketing term for it. Essentially, it's a service and that helps developers build and ship APIs faster. So essentially, we built an SDK that you add on top of your code in whatever language you want. And out of the box, we give you real-time API monitoring, logging, and error tracking, automatically generated and updated documentation, API analytics, quality score, and much more. So we're like basically the Swiss Army knife of API development. If you're doing something that requires an API, we can definitely help you understand things much easier and build things much faster. When we were at the agency, we always like to keep the team small, right? So essentially, it was always me kind of at the helm. I like to be involved in day-to-day development. I still do to this day. We used to do a lot of apps and APIs. So we probably at one point got to a number of like 50 simultaneous apps and APIs that we were maintaining and updating and working with other developers on multiple different parts in that ecosystem. So it really got to a point where I would wake up at like 8 a.m. my time and go to sleep at like 11 p.m. my time and literally work most of the day, because by the time I would finish my day around 5 p.m. our time, you guys in the US, New York, LA, etc. would wake up and we would have to provide support to developers there. So it became really kind of counterproductive, and especially when we worked with developers who were maybe remote, like in India or even in the US, a lot of the confusion around APIs was mostly stemming from the fact that nobody actually understood nor saw how that was working or what they were doing, right? So you would have a developer in the US sitting next to my client who claimed that the API wasn't working, even though he didn't authenticate well, right? And he thought he did everything okay, but he didn't understand it. He didn't see what he was doing wrong. We started thinking, okay, how can we at least prepare for the day, so by the time we wake up, we at least have enough data about what everybody did while we were sleeping, so we can understand what everybody else will need. And we started developing this logging tool that would at least help us understand, okay, this is what happened, this is what they were doing, this is who was doing it, from where, etc., etc. And slowly but surely, we started kind of adding more and more features as we use the product on various production APIs. We, at that point, of course, just like everybody else, had a scaling problem. Our problem was basically we needed to be able to scale as much as the API that we were being added to. So if your API had 1 million requests per month, we needed to be able to handle 1 million times whatever the amount of projects we had. So I would essentially, in that period, until we figured that part out, I would turn on Treble in the morning when I would wake up, and I would turn it off before I would go to sleep, just so it doesn't crash, my clients' APIs and servers, and etc. We wanted to drop the project because we never could figure out the scaling part, and then randomly just basically working on something else and watching a few ABS videos in the background, I kind of got the idea on how to solve that. And I immediately said to Darko and Tia, I figured it out. Let's finally build this. Now there's nothing stopping us.
Well, let's dig into the MVP then. So you start to build it. Tell me about that first product you built, how long it took you to build, and what sort of tools you used to bring it to life.
Like I said, we dropped the product a few times because of scaling issues. Like, we had two problems. We were always worried it would cost us too much to scale, and we were also worried about slowing down the APIs that we were attached to. So I tried to do it like in blast. So I would work on it for like 15 days, couldn't crack it, just give up, and then pick it up in like 2 months and try to do it again. So I would say that the figuring out the scaling part lasted like 3-6 months or something like that. Once I figured that out, we started working on it, I would say, more intensively. I mean, we've been in the business for 10 years. We know how scope creep works, how to build a real MVP, if you will. So we said, let's just make an interface, let's see how it works for us, and then we'll take it from there. So we literally built something, I would say, within a month, and we got the interface that we wanted. And then we started slowly, literally dividing things into, I would say, sections, or if you will, and then knocking out that section. So we would do analytics, then not only do that for like a month, then do something else. So I would say the entire process from start to finish of building Treble to what it is, I would say today, was like 1 year of working on the side, our agency. And I have to say, like, when it comes to tools, we use Trello a lot. And I think if we didn't use Trello, Treble would not exist today. I would organize everything from the smallest bug to the biggest general broad direction we want to take it into Trello. And I think it was very helpful into making sure that I was accountable enough to knock off those tasks. When we log into Trello and see like 30 pending tasks for Treble, you just inherently want to complete some of them. So Trello has helped us a lot. We, of course, just like any developers, used a lot of GitHub, a lot of Sublime, and a lot of ABS.
With any MVP, you've got to work through certain decisions and trade-offs. And, there's little, tidbits sprinkled into your description of the MVP, but let's dive into them a little bit. So what decisions and trade-offs did you have to make when building that MVP, and how did you cope with them?
Like I said, I think we had like 10 years of training before we built Treble. So I say we had real experience of how to do it and how not to do it. So we really were very strict on the amount of features that we wanted to add in the MVP. And even now, like, if it's a good feature, yes, we'll add it, but not until we look at the bigger picture, right? So in the original MVP, we didn't actually have a lot of the features that we have today. We had real-time API logging, we had error tracking, that was like one of our core things, and automatically generated documentation. We didn't have a quality score of the API, we didn't have API analytics, we didn't have running tests, we didn't have any of that. So basically the idea is, let's just get the data into our system, and then we'll figure it out step by step. And that's what we did. You're dealing with a lot of code that is not your code. We always kind of said, let's try to make it work on most of the code bases and most of the APIs, and we'll deal with the exceptions, because are always exceptions in the end, right? We would cover 80% of the cases we knew about, and then we would spend some more time after the 80% was done to fix the 20% that were like weird edge cases, exceptions, etc., etc. Like I said, in the original MVP, we did a lot of things just to get it up and running in a sense. And of course, you have to catch up with the things that you didn't do. So we did spend a period of time fixing those and updating those. You know how that saying goes, better done than perfect. And I think that cannot be more true, because if you're building something and you're not sure if it's going to work, yes, everybody wants it to be perfect, bug-free, perfect look, but it's better that it's done. And most people will, like I said, forgive you if you have a problem or error, or they will tell you, hey, something is working, and then you'll get a chance to fix it, rather than if you wait 2 years and then bump up something that people simply don't want. And I think some of the ideas that are now part of Treble, like, for example, the API analytics, like the quality score, these are ideas that, you know, other developers and other clients of ours have told us, hey, it would be really cool if we could get this. And, you know, that's what we did. We listened to what our customers are saying.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. And obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors. But they take time and energy pulling you away from building and shipping. And that's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups like yours get audit ready and build a strong security foundation quickly and painlessly. How, you ask? Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. And the platform connects you with trusted vCISOs to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. Join over 8,000 companies, including many Y Combinator and Techstars startups who trust Vanta. Simplify compliance and get $1,000 off at vanta.com/codestory. That's VANTA.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by Kinsta. Between juggling client meetings, managing your website, and keeping up with everyday tasks, who has the time to stress out about website security? Well, with Kinsta, the technical stuff is taken care of, so you can focus on what you do best. Kinsta provides managed hosting for WordPress, offering lightning-fast load times, top-tier security, and unmatched human-only customer support. Whether you're a business owner, web developer, or running a digital agency, Kinsta makes managing your website easy and efficient. Kinsta provides enterprise-grade security, being one of the few hosting providers for WordPress with SOC 2 and other certifications, guaranteeing the highest level of security for your website. Thanks to their unlimited free expert-led migrations, Kinsta ensures a smooth transition for you from other hosting providers. Customers have reported 200% faster load times post-migration to their platform. What I find cool about Kinsta is their fast and reliable customer service and premium features that are included at no extra cost. Ready to experience Kinsta's hosting for yourself? Get your first month free when you sign up at kinsta.com today. That's KINSTA.com. How did you progress the product from there? You've got a solid product. You're hearing feedback from the market. How did you go about progressing it, and how did you go about building your roadmap and deciding, okay, this is the next most important thing to build?
I've always been a strong proponent of testing things and throwing things into the fire and seeing how they come up on the other end. We actually, as soon as we got the MVP running, we talked to a few of our clients and got this up and running in production APIs within like a few weeks. Once you're in production on real servers, things change, right? Whenever there's a problem, you try to immediately solve that problem, understand what the problem is. You no longer have the luxury to basically sit around, wait, think about it, etc., etc. You have to act because you are responsible for somebody else's app, somebody else's website at the end of the day. As far as the things that we missed, bug fixes, etc., etc., I would say it was like a speed crash course into some of these things that we didn't know, and we essentially fixed them as soon as possible. The only thing when we were maturing the product, our clients were always a mix. So we never had only just the developers. We had like a steady flow of different roles. So we would have developers, we would have CEOs, we would have CTOs. All of them had ideas about where the product should go, what they wanted to see. So we always kind of tried to listen to all of those, I would say 3-4 different worlds. You know, we would pick what was the most common and most repeating problem or issue that they were having, and then implemented that into our product. So I've mentioned a couple of times the analytics section and the scoring section. This is something that actually everybody kind of hinted, but they weren't using the same words, right? So you got to figure out what they want, what exactly, how, etc., etc. And we also have to be very privacy focused, of course, when dealing with these things. So I would say we added features that we wanted to see first and foremost, and then we added features that we gathered based on the feedback. And like I said, the more you're at it, the deeper you are, the better the product gets. And I think one of the advantages in our case is that we literally were the guys who were doing this on a daily basis. So we were producing apps every day. We were producing APIs every day. We were living that world. So we knew exactly what the pain points are. Now, as far as the roadmap, I mean, with this product, the roadmap kind of writes itself, you know, most of the time. We also had a lot of ideas. Clients tell us ideas. Ideas come to us in the weirdest ways and in places. But generally, in terms of our broad roadmap, right now, I would say we are focused more on understanding internal APIs. And then in the future, we want to make it so that anybody can turn their internal API into a public API with a click of a button. Because we know how your API works, we can literally produce you a staging or a development version of your API without you having to launch servers, without you or the developers have to do anything, etc., etc. As far as my personal pet peeve is, we want to make sure that when you see an API, you can integrate that API as fast as possible. In most cases, that means you have to understand, like, you're basically, whenever you're integrating an API, you go find a client that makes HTTP requests in any shape, way, or form, any platform. Then you need to understand what models you need and what you need to send. So essentially, because we already have all of that data, the idea is that we generate a lot of this stuff for you. Our thing is, we never want to replace developers, right? I'm a developer myself. I take a lot of pride in what we do, but we want to kind of help the developer focus on what matters. And what they really like is writing code and not basically exploring documentation, figuring out what they're sending, what they're not, etc., etc. Those are some of the broad strokes in terms of where we plan to take the product in the next 6 months to a year.
Let's switch to team. So how did you go about building your team? And what did you look for in those people to indicate that, you know, they were the winning horses to join you?
I was very lucky to have a co-founder that stayed with me, I would say, for the past 10 years, Darko. So we co-founded the agency together. When the opportunity came with Treble, he immediately jumped on it, just like me. So from that sense, I would say we were in sync for the past 10 years. Tia, who's our mobile developer, has joined us like 5 years ago. She has been a huge help to us in terms of what we're trying to do on mobile with Treble and some of the other stuff that we're doing. So I would say the core team has always been there throughout the agency. These are people that will simply get the job done, because at the end of the day, you need people who will get the job done and not talk about how to get the job done, right? It doesn't matter if it's like research, marketing, manual labor, setting up IKEA furniture in the office. This is the team that will do it. I can lean on any of them at any point in time. And if I'm not in the office, I know everything is still going to run relatively cool. Like I said, we watch everything through the prism of what do you want to achieve. We have one rule. We only we'll hire you if you like what we're doing and like working with us. Because fundamentally, if you don't like what we're doing and don't believe, you don't have to work with us. You can be the best programmer. There is no hard feelings, but we're looking for people who have the same passion as we do around fixing these problems, around helping other developers make their life easier, etc., etc. So I think when we talk about the team, we look for people who like I don't know if I could curse, but get shit done, as you guys in the USA.
Well, let's talk about scalability. So, and you mentioned this early on, when you're talking about kind of pre-MVP or working through using the product in your agency and talking about scaling. So it'd be interesting to see where you start with this question. But did you build this to scale efficiently from day one, or are you fighting this as you grow?
Whoever tells you they kind of build it from day one is lying. So you always start by chasing that dream, right? I think as a developer, you always try to build something beautiful. You want to make that perfect, but it rarely starts out that way. And like I told you, we dropped this project twice because we couldn't get the scale to work. Scaling in our case is very, very important because you're adding our piece of code onto your API, and we first have to handle all the load that you have, and secondly, we cannot slow down your API. Those were the two guiding principles that we had when we started designing this product. So we started exploring a lot of solutions. Just when you say scaling, you immediately think of serverless. So that's where we kind of inherently started looking at. I would say we use a lot of serverless technology nowadays, but I can tell you that we are heavy users of S3. The magic of our system is it's so simple that it's beautiful, right? It works because it's simple, and we managed to do that with AVS and a lot of the things that they're doing in S3, and we struggled a lot with that, and sometimes we even struggle today, even though we set things up. Truly, nowadays, there's no way we would go down and impact your API or slow your API down. It's just a matter of when we will process the logs. We've so far been able to process every single log within 400 milliseconds, which is really good for us. And we went from processing 200,000 API calls in July, I would say, to about 4 million API calls as of today.
Well, as you step out on the balcony and you look across all that you've built, what are you most proud of?
I would definitely say that big picture, that would be the scaling part. I've been in this business for a very long time, and people often think, when you see a complicated, scalable solution, it must be complicated. It must be so hard. There are so many moving parts. But I think that the most profitable, most functional, most beautiful products are actually the simplest products in its core. So I think the scaling part is something that I'm very proud of. And then when we dig into small details, there are a million things that we've kind of managed to do. One of the things that Dribble does is essentially it detects the details of your device. So let's say you're building a mobile app and you have an API, right? Dribble can tell you which OS are you using, your user is using, which version of the app that user has installed, etc., etc. And if you can imagine that, we could do all of this without actually having physical access to the device. The beauty there is we had to probably research for the past 10 years what Apple has been calling their iOS versions, how they're structuring their HTTP requests, etc., in order to be able to figure out, okay, when an API call is made, it was made from iOS 15.01 and the app version is this. So I think we've made a lot of good tech around this.
Let's flip the script a little bit. So tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
I make so many mistakes on a daily basis that it's ridiculous, right? So it's not one mistake. It's many mistakes that we've probably made. Even today, architecturally, we still have things that we want to refactor, etc., etc. I would say that on that front, usually the team keeps me in check. That's very important when you have a team that will hold you accountable, but not in a bad way. Nobody's gonna shame me, but they're gonna tell me, here, you're doing this incorrectly, this is bad, this is slow, this is what you should change, right? So I remember whenever the system would be slower than what they are used to, I would say slower than instant, they would immediately text me, hey, I tried using it and I got maybe a few milliseconds of delay. Can you check what's going on? And even to this day, sometimes they're like, this came into the system 400 milliseconds later. Could we do it maybe faster? And that's always it's I would say it's a curse, right? They try to keep me in check. I try to keep them in check as well. And I think it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're aware that that is actually a mistake, and that at one point either you will fix it or it will fix it for itself, and then you don't have control over how that's fixed. So definitely I would recommend trying to recognize when a mistake happens, and trying to figure it out how to solve it as soon as possible.
What does the future look like for the product and for your team? You mentioned the 6 months to 1 year time frame. What about beyond that?
We're building right now, besides everything that we're doing on the web, and I would say I call this the platform. We're building this whole suite of mobile apps. We're building a native all-in-one Mac, iPad, iPhone app for iOS. And again, it's not going to be React Native. It's not going to be something else. It's truly done natively in Swift UI by our developer Tia. I think that will change the way people manage APIs, understand APIs, especially on the go. I can't tell you how many times I went for lunch and was, pulled into a meeting from lunch because there was a crisis, quote unquote crisis. And when we were jump on the meeting, there was no crisis. That could have been avoided only if I had access to the data that Treble gives me. So I think when we kind of ship this out, it's going to really change the way people are building, testing, analyzing APIs from the day they start working on it to post-production, I would say. Another one is documentation. So we're definitely more and more interested in understanding deeply how your models are structured in documentation. Our end goal, to be honest, is to remove the need for documentation, because I think people mostly, when you think about how you learn things, right? Most people learn things by example. So if you're learning math, you'll try to solve a couple of equations, you'll learn it by example. When you're learning how to develop, you're learning by example. You're testing the code out, you're trying it out. I think it should be no different for APIs. Right now, everything is kind of dependent on you writing perfect docs or getting perfect docs, etc., etc. But I think in the future, it's going to be more about, hey, here's how the response looks like after you tested it. This is what you can expect. Tomorrow that might change, you should check again or be notified when that changes. The problem nowadays is you could have API docs that are valid today, and tomorrow you could change 5 different things. So it's very agile in that sense, and we're looking towards moving the needle in more from traditional ways of documenting into more example-based documentation. And I'm very excited about kind of helping speed up some of the traditionally long processes, like setting up a staging server, a testing server, mocking the data from your API. I would say one of the best things that we would like to do is maybe designers could maybe create interactive demos from Sketch or Figma by really interacting with the API directly from there. So if you needed a name, if you needed to log in, a designer could literally connect these dots from like Sketch or Figma to the external API and essentially, make sure that workflows and testing and stuff like, and mockups can be done much quicker and are more realistic than what you have today.
Let's switch to you, Vedran. Who influences the way that you work? Name a CEO, a CTO, an architect, really any person you look up to, and why.
It's hard not to answer that question from a technical perspective. On a smaller scale, I would say I admire a lot what Taylor Otwell is doing with Laravel, and basically if he didn't do such a good job with Laravel and some of the stuff that they did there, we probably wouldn't have built Treble. So I really like the open source approach. I really like the dedication to, I would say, perfection, to making sure things are not just work well, but are actually beautiful. And then another guy who I'm closely actually following is a guy called Jack Ellis from Phantom Analytics. He's building like this privacy-focused Google Analytics replacement, and he has so many great blog posts and ideas about scaling, about infrastructure, etc. So I would say a lot of them impact my way of thinking about approaching problems, approaching how we build things, how it scales, etc., etc. If I had to say on like a bigger scale, I really like what Satya Nadella is doing with Microsoft. I mean, if you think about it, they went from being the most, I mean, not the most, but pretty hated, right, in the tech community to now owning GitHub, even competing with Microsoft Teams, having like this vibrant developer support with Azure and just the Surface devices. I mean, in general, I think, did a really phenomenal job turning the table for Microsoft and kind of now being viewed as somebody who's also now like a really nice startup. I'm not gonna say almost like Apple, but close. Then I've been following, like, for the longest time, I've been following Kevin Rose, and I don't know if you know, he's like the co-founder or founder of Dig, and I always watched his podcast Dig Nation, so I've been following him forever. He also, one of the good things about him is he was also open to admitting when he failed, and he failed many times, and he would openly say how he failed. He would essentially describe the failure, which is, I think, the best thing somebody could do for you. Here is how you're gonna fail and where. And I think you could learn a lot from people that actually try to do things.
Well, we talked about a mistake, but a little bit different spin. If you could go back to the beginning, what would you do differently? Or where would you consider taking a different approach?
If you can try to predict all the architectural styles and problems that might occur before you go into production, that's probably the best advice I could give somebody and even myself. And that's where I would start to change things if I was doing it again. Let's say we're processing 4 million API calls. I don't have the luxury to just maybe migrate the data and just kind of change MySQL tables, etc., etc. So I no longer have the luxury nor the speed to basically re-architect quickly, right? You can always do it, but it's always like a very stressful thing and painful. So I think you should get the fundamentals of your product, at least the core parts, good and ready before you kind of move to production. Because once you do, like I said, it's a different ball game. You have to make sure you're up and running, you're not slowing anything down, your customers are happy, your people are happy. So I think I'd focus more on the core parts of our product and making sure architecturally they're good, even at an expense of not adding all the features. I would rather have the core working perfectly than anything else.
Last question, Vedran. So you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young entrepreneur who's built the next big thing. They're jazzed about it. They can't wait to show it off to the world. Can't wait to show it off to you right there on the plane. What advice do you give that person, having gone down this road a bit?
Just get it out the door. Don't wait. Don't overthink things. Most people will forgive you if you do stupid things. If you have something, go do it. Go get it out the door. See what it feels like. Don't be afraid of feedback. I think feedback is the best thing anybody can ask for. People will literally tell you, you're doing this good, this bad, and you can get probably the most valuable information just by talking to your clients and customers.
That's great advice. Well, Vedran, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for telling the creation story of Treble.
Thank you very much, Noah. It was a real pleasure.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. Support the show on patreon.com/codestory for just $5 to $10 a month. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ12 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.